All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arne Depuydt. I'm the art director at De Morgen. Um, First, I'm going to show you very short what De Morgen is. It's a daily newspaper. We're quite small, like our average print is 55,000 in a week. And our digital is around that. We're on a Berliner format, and we have 32 pages. It's like divided in two sections. The first section is newsy. The second one is, the first 3 pages is the biggest story of the day. And then we have some cultural pages, some sport pages, and then some service pages. We also, on Wednesday, have this supplement. It's literature. And in the weekend, we have this magazine and also a supplement called Zino, which are the bigger interviews and reportage. But I'm going to focus today on the daily newspaper, and it will be actually a bit of a personal story in how it all began, like you can see, and it started for me in 2008. When the newspaper was very text-driven, we had this 5-column grid that looks like this. What you can see here is that we have like still a very classical approach, just text and pictures, not doing much with it. This is how the front page looked like at that time, 2009. It still is the same, even a bit worse, as you can see. Not that many pictures, a lot of text. Still this 5-column grid. And also what's important is this sutra. There's this thing on the bottom that's always there, which makes it very hard to do something different with your newspaper. This is a cover also. Here it keeps going on, always the same. It's for 3 years now, and it was like that before. Still the same. I'm showing you this because I think it's important that at that time, our newspaper was convinced that they had to stay the same for a long time to not like scare the readers. And that's actually what we tried not to do anymore. We tried to change a lot. So in 2012, we had the first redesign. But here it's still this 5-column grid, and still this approach with this thing at the bottom. The only thing that changed actually is a bit modern typography and a bit more color. But the basic idea was still the same. As you can see, it's not really different. It just looks a bit more fresh, but that's it actually. That's the cover. We changed the logo also to something that had to look a bit more modern, I think. At that time in 2013, we wanted to change something, but we did not do the redesign yet. We just tried to do something with the pictures more. We also sometimes shifted to the 6-column grid, but that was not really part of the redesign. It was just trying to do something different with the design that we had at that time. Like here you see the bit of a difference, like this snake and this logo. We tried to put more elements in it to make it a bit more vibrant. Like this was at that time very special to do, this cutout. I put the text on top of it. In 2014 was actually a very important year for us because we really started to change the idea how to approach the newspaper. And that's also where this design team is very important, because we work with very good graphic designers, and we really wanted them to break out of this typical idea of how making newspapers, like this always putting a picture on text. So we pushed them to go farther than that. So they create this kind of stuff, much more infographics at that time. Like this is also a good example. Or this. Or this. Like this is also a good example where the graphic designer who does this page has to be very creative, and they have to come up with these ideas. We are not like telling them what to do, which is very nice because they do it like on an everyday basis, and it makes the newspaper interesting every day. We also use a lot of illustrations combined with infographics. And what we see here is a kind of shift, because at that time we tried to make the newspaper more vibrant with elements, graphical elements. Like this is a good example where we try to do something special. But it's not a very good idea, because you can see that sometimes we lose it completely, like here, because we don't have the elements in the basic layout of the newspaper at that time to make it vibrant. So we needed to add this illustration madness. Like here on the right page, it's not really necessary to put the stuff like this on this page, because it's not really adding something content-wise. Like here also. It are nice experiments, and it was important because here everybody from the design team was like breaking loose of this very old school way of making newspapers. But the problem here is that we, like with the hair thing on top on the right, it's also an element that we added that's not really necessary, and it does not make your paper like better. It just makes it look a bit more interesting, but it's not like how it should be. Here also with the cars, it's also an attempt to make it a bit more interesting, but still, it is not adding an extra layer to your newspaper. Also with the cigar, it's not necessary to show a cigar if you're talking about a cigar. It should be an extra level. Also here, that's an example where it starts to get a bit off of the layout that we normally do. So it starts looking not like the Morgen anymore. So we wanted to change that. And we did this complete redesign because we wanted to go back to the basis. We wanted to have an visually dominant newspaper, a visually supporting newspaper that was connected with the content and not like just adding some illustrations. And to do that, we needed like a stronger basic layout that was more interesting. So we ended up with this 13-column grid, which created natural white spaces, which is very important for the newspaper because this white space makes it look very clean, and you do not feel the need to add much more to make it look interesting. This is like a basic setup, how it looks like. An important thing here also, and that's maybe the most important thing to tell you today, is that we do not work with templates. We start every day with white pages, which forces us to sketch the newspaper every day because it's super important to see visually what the mix will be so that you can decide before everybody begins where the bigger stories will be, where the infographics need to be, where you have to be like calm down a bit with your design. This is an example of a regular page where it's very important that we try to get a good mix with pictures, with extra elements. And the most important thing here to make it better or more easy to read is that the most important story always has this bigger column and all the rest has this smaller column, so you can rapidly see where the most important stuff is. Also, the decision of pictures is very important because we always, in the mix, try to have a good difference in like this flat pictures and horizontal, vertical pictures to make it more dynamic. This is also a good example of that. But you can see that we not really do this very special stuff anymore because it does not need anymore. Sometimes when we don't really have the good pictures, what happens a lot, especially now, because we have a lot of stories that are not very newsy, then you have to create something like this thing on the right, which is interesting because these graphic designers need to read the pieces and they have to be very, they have to come up with this stuff for themselves. Also, the photography is important because we work a lot with our own photographers and you can see that in the newspaper. This is an example of the cultural pages where we use this more pink color to make it more vibrant and to make it less look like news. This is a good example of the use of illustrations in our newspaper. We do this quite a lot. This is an example of the infographicist who has to be very creative with the pages. We do this stuff on a daily basis, so it's very nice to have people that are very talented to make stuff like that. This is also a good example, the left one, when you do not have a picture, that they create something visually that is interesting enough in your mix of the newspaper. Then we have this special thing is that the bigger story in the newspaper it always goes like on 2 pages. And here we try to be very creative in how we approach it and how we illustrate it to make it more interesting. And I think this is important also because if you want to have a printed newspaper and you can make stuff like that, you really make a difference with the digital stuff. And I think it's very important that you have these two, that you do not like copy or printed stuff to digital. I think it's interesting for your reader that they feel that they have 2 different things. We try to do that with stuff like this or that. I'm just going to show you some examples. This is something that we also try to do, is do something with the headline to make it a bit more interesting also. This is also the example now. The examples that you saw were from the first period of the redesign. We already changed it, and now we have this, so that we have two covers actually, that we can present the biggest story of the day, like on, like just the front cover. And it's also very fun to do for our graphic designers, because if you can do this on a daily basis, it's not quite a boring job. It's like making a poster every day. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the covers, because we really try to stand out when something big happens. We do not want like the typical approach. This is a cover when this airplane crashed. And the thing you would do is like look at all the pictures and try to bring these newsy pictures where you see the crashed plane, but we always try to bring it at like more in an emotional way, I don't know. This is for the Charlie Hebdo. This is a cover from a politician who committed suicide. So we wanted to be very sober and not like typical in a way. That's actually the last that I'm going to show you. This is the cover that we made the 22nd of March, when the airport in Brussels was attacked, and the subway station. It was very hard to do because we had all these pictures, and if this story is so close with you, it's very hard to decide what to do. And for the newspaper, we asked 5 or 6 from our best illustrators to just create something that we could use in the newspaper. And one of them created this. It was not meant to be on the cover, but the first time I saw it, I put it in there, and for me it was the perfect image. I did not have to think much longer about it. This is how we approached the pages inside of the attacks. We also try to have a good mix in, like you can see, bringing the news reportage going like over more than one page, and then break it with pictures to go back to more articles. That's a little mistake there on the right. This is the last page. Okay, I'm going to stop the presentation here. I hope you enjoyed it, that you saw something interesting. Thank you very much for listening.